I'm Gary Bell, and I'm the webmaster of freepigeonpress.com. And this is a series of podcast videos which I'm doing on the subject of the Sinclair Method. My very special guest with me today is Robert Raplian of intellectualicebergs.com. Robert, you were one of the first people to interview Dr. David Sinclair on the subject of the Sinclair Method. Well, I'm saying you were one of the first people to interview him, but your series of podcast videos, which are available on YouTube, which I'll link to underneath this video, still quite prominent and still quite talked about today. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you first came to hear about the Sinclair Method, and firstly how you came to get in touch with Dr. Sinclair?
Sure. I was doing the podcast in 2005, and it's kind of a straightforward science-ish podcast where we tried to explain complicated subjects in ways that you could explain to your pointy-haired boss, as we advertised. And so at one point, David Sinclair's brother, Steve, sent me an email saying, hey, you should check out this thing my brother's doing. It's kind of interesting. Gave me a few details, and then I connected with Dr. Sinclair himself, and he said he cured alcoholism. Now, this is a huge claim, especially for 2005, and I was incredulous. I felt I needed to do a whole bunch of research on it before I would even interview him. But 3 months later, it all checked out, and so I connected with him over Skype, and we talked about it for a while. And that's how that one came to be.
Wow. Just about David Sinclair, I mean, tragically passed away a couple of years ago through cancer. And you got to know him a little bit, I think it's fair to say, Robert. What was he like?
He was one of those people who honestly wanted to help people. He wasn't in it for the money. He patented the Sinclair Method, but he more copylefted it than anything else. He was trying to give it away, and was perpetually disappointed that nobody actually wanted it. In Finland, he actually had an opportunity to do lunch with the Queen as part of his reward for having solved this serious issue, but nobody outside of Finland has taken him seriously. And I've really come to sympathize with that perspective over the years.
It's just so sad. I mean, it sort of makes you think of famous historical figures such as Ignaz Semmelweis. You know, it's very much sort of similar to that. You know.
Yeah, maybe now that he's dead, people start paying attention.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it's quite interesting just looking at the timeline. You're saying that this was 2005, because I actually did a Google search earlier today just to check the chronology of when Roy Escapa's book, The Cure for Alcoholism, came out. And according to my research, it came out in 2008. So you actually spoke to David Sinclair before the book actually came out. So would I be correct in saying that there was just about nothing on the internet whatsoever back then? You know, I mean, this was long before Claudia Christian got involved with the Sinclair Method. So would I be correct in saying that you were actually one of the first people speaking about this?
As far as I know, I was the first actual podcast or news video that actually went into details about what it was. So I did that one in 2006, and shortly after that, Dr. Dave from Shrink Wrap Radio sent me an email saying, "Hey, this is really interesting. Could you put me in contact with him?" So I connected those two, and I actually hear more about Dr. Dave's podcast than I do my own. So I think that that was the one that a lot of people are most familiar with as starting off the audio revolution. He had a significantly larger following than I did.
Wow. But I mean, still, I would say that your contribution was quite significant, because I mean, um, it's not just me sort of giving blinds flattery here, but it is a really good interview. Um, so congratulations on that. It's stood the test of time, and I still quite often refer people to it on my own website. Um, so I just wanted to ask you another question, Robert, because in addition to that, you're also quite notable for being the architect of the original Wikipedia page for the Sinclair Method. Now, a bit of a touchy subject this, because the Wikipedia page during its existence just seemed to be sabotaged all of the time, and seemed to have numerous problems. And now, thanks to the Wikipedia police, it's actually being pulled off, and what instead exists on Wikipedia isn't a Wikipedia page. It's actually a small little section on the Sinclair Method under the page for naltrexone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Right. Wikipedia has a "I never heard of it" issue. They Anything that a sufficient number of the editors haven't heard of, they consider to be non-notable and therefore not worthy of Wikipedia. This is particularly problematic with alcoholism treatments because there are so many of them and so much snake oil out there, and so many people who want their one solution out there as the one and only solution, that they really do have to monitor for which ones are meaningful. But in the case of alcoholism, they pretty much clear out anything that isn't AA.
Hmm. Right. Um, yeah, just during the 5 years plus that I've actually been involved with the Sinclair Method, it's actually going to be my fifth anniversary next month, Robert. How about that?
Congratulations.
Yeah, during the 5 years that I've been involved, it's become quite clear that there's a lot of resistance to this method, and there's a lot of vested interests. And I just want to ask the question, just from your perception, who are the bad guys when it comes to suppressing information about the Sinclair Method?
I'm hesitant to call people bad guys. Everybody is selfish, and alcoholism is no different with that. The bad guys in this case would then be pretty much everybody, from the medical doctors who refuse to accept that the world might have changed to the alcoholics who are dead set on their one true solution. Uh, I found that medical doctors were absolutely insistent that naltrexone didn't work and continuing to drink didn't work, therefore both of them together would be even worse, when it actually turns out that having naltrexone and alcohol together is like taking an antibiotic when you have a disease. Antibiotics don't really work if you don't have the disease, and the disease won't get better without the antibiotics. And that's the same dynamic you get with the Sinclair method, but it goes against the grain. There's also the large institutions like, I don't know, Betty Ford Clinic. You got 200 beds of inpatient care that you can't support with any solution that you give a person a pill and say go home. You have the insurance companies who make their money as a percentage off the top of all the treatment. So if some of the treatment goes away, the insurance companies lose money. And you have all of the special interests. AA just wants to promote AA. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers just want to get mad at people. And nobody actually wants a solution. Everybody wants to blame the alcoholics.
Right. Just regarding getting the message out there when it comes to the Sinclair method, and I mean, obviously, people are doing different things. I mean, there's Facebook pages now and there's blogs, but what would you say in your analysis are the best methods for getting the word out there about this treatment? I mean, would you say that a blog is better than a YouTube channel, or would you say that Facebook is the way to go, or would you say something like Quora is quite a good platform?
People don't respond incredibly well to pure information, and that's how Quora works. Is people ask questions, people put information out there, and then people who aren't engaged in self fulfillment don't actually look in places for new information. Facebook actually works because the thing that really convinced me that this was real, I spent a solid 5 years digging into it, asking all of the experts, calling the NIAAA, calling AA, talking to individual doctors, and most of them said, yeah, it sounds okay. It sounds like it would work, but I'd be loath to actually let an alcoholic continue drinking. But the thing that convinced me that this was real was actually talking to people like yourself who had gone through it, and yours may be anecdotal evidence, and for any treatment for alcoholism, you can find people for which it works. But if it works and it continues to work and you lead a happy, productive life that is not continually tortured by the desire to continue drinking, then I think that that's very compelling. But I think that we need a critical mass of that kind of people. Is a critical mass of people like you who state that it worked for me, it continues to work for me, and I don't have to worry about relapse. It's a concern, but it's not something that bugs me on a daily basis.
Last question, Robert. Just over the last 5 years that I've been involved with the campaign to promote the Sinclair Method, and that I've also been a recipient of this treatment, I've found that there's been quite a big sea change. I mean, now, for instance, whenever I look on Google, there's loads about TSM on there. But my question to you is, how long do you think it will be before this goes mainstream? I mean, what's your projection? Do you think another 5 years, another 10 years?
I would hesitate to guess simply because I'm always way too optimistic in that direction. I would have thought that it would be everywhere by now, that we would be disassembling our hospitals. But part of the problem is that Sinclair isn't the only answer, because because alcoholism isn't just the one thing that the Sinclair method treats. I keep saying that alcoholism is a equivocation. There are many things that alcoholism actually means. It's about as specific as a headache. What it really means is you keep drinking alcohol even though you know it's bad for you. And there are at least 4 things that cause people to continue drinking even though they know it's bad for them. And it's only the mental rewiring that is caused by endorphins that the Sinclair Method specifically treats. But so this means that if you have habituation, if you have a social maladjustment, if you are self-treating anxiety, for any of these, it's not going to work for you. So the treatment for alcoholism should obviously involve diagnosis of which of these things is specific to the person's alcoholism problem, and then using the Sinclair method to attempt to draw the person out of it if you can't identify habituation or social maladjustment as something that needs to be handled first or also. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it occurs to me that if one of the biggest reasons why you're drinking is because you're drinking to numb terrible anxiety, then yes, naltrexone and the Sinclair method will help to extinguish the craving for alcohol that you may have developed, but it will do nothing whatsoever for that underlying anxiety problem, which was perhaps the first reason why you actually picked up the drinking to begin with.
Sure.
So,
And similar,
so it makes
similar
perfect sense.
to the doctors up at Colorado University who treat alcoholism for their students. And if you go to school and suddenly alcohol is the one thing that allows you to interact normally with other people at school, or at minimum, you blame alcohol for being able to interact normally with other people at your school, then you have a social maladjustment that naltrexone is not going to touch. So I would hope that at some point the Sinclair method would become one of the standard treatments for these problems, but I don't expect it ever to become the one and only.
Well, on that note, Robert, you've been an absolutely brilliant interviewee, and I would also just like to take this opportunity to thank you for being an excellent mentor over these last 5 years, because you were one of the people who really helped me right at the beginning when I started my own journey. So I would like to say a very personal thank you to you for that.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. It's really good to finally talk with you in virtual person, and I was really happy I could provide you with the information you needed to get where you needed to go.
You've been a great mentor and a great ally and friend. Thank you very much, Robert. It's been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.